the United States, as President Biden has said, is happy to compete with anyone and everyone. We understand that the PRC has a relationship with Thailand. We do not ask Thailand to choose.
We are going to interview Deputy Secretary of State who is sitting in Thailand right now. This is her first official overseas trip since taking the number 2 post at the State Department. And the nation Thailand is one of 7 media who got a chance to interview her also. Let's hear what she said today.
Thank you. Next, if we could, let's go to Philip Hymans, Bloomberg News in Singapore. Philip, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this briefing. Regarding ASEAN, perhaps you've seen recent news about 9 countries asking the UN to lift arms embargo language, on Burma. And so I wonder what your reaction to that is. And given, that ASEAN has yet to appoint an envoy for Myanmar, that meeting was weeks and weeks ago. I wonder what your take on that is as well. Thank you.
So one of the reasons for my trip was to affirm ASEAN centrality to what we do here in Southeast Asia. And I was very glad for the opportunity to meet with all the permanent representatives at ASEAN at the Secretariat in person, which was a first for many to be able to meet in person. We were properly masked and distanced and careful, but nonetheless, it's very hard to substitute for that in-person set of relationships. We support ASEAN's 5-point consensus plan. We know that ASEAN is consulting with all in the region as they proceed, wanting to be successful in their engagement. The plan calls for them to be in contact with the military leaders in Burma, as well as all parties, including democratic parties in Burma. We hope, of course, that happens as soon as possible. There is no time to wait as we all face a brutal humanitarian crisis for the people of Burma. In all of the discussions the government always has, we always have to keep in mind that people's day-to-day lives have changed dramatically in Burma. Not only are they facing the COVID-19 crisis that most of the rest of the region is now facing, but they are also facing attacks by the military regime on civilians. They are facing threats and intimidation, and there is a great humanitarian crisis unfolding, indeed on the way to a failed state, and that means the most for the people of Burma who wish to live their lives in freedom. We have seen in their own organizing and resistance what the people of Burma want for themselves. And I thank ASEAN and the international community for the stalwart support that the Burmese people have the democratic future they have worked so hard for.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Bhavan Jai Pragas from South China Morning Post in Hong Kong. Bhavan, please go ahead.
Deputy Secretary, thank you for making the time to speak with us. I want to continue on Myanmar. Firstly, on the question that was posed earlier about ASEAN nations purportedly not supporting an arms embargo on Myanmar, what is the U.S. take on that? I mean, would you, in your consultations with the principals in the region, be asking them to support the UN General Assembly resolution, including an arms embargo? And secondly, I mean, you've spoken about ASEAN's role, ASEAN centrality, but it's been more than a month since they had that meeting in Jakarta and came up with the 5-point consensus. It seems from reports that the bloc is deeply split. So could it be that the solution for Myanmar does not lie with ASEAN taking the lead, and is the U.S. considering other kind of options, in diplomatically having a more direct approach in dealing with the issue?
As I noted, we believe in ASEAN centrality, and the action that ASEAN took in unanimously agreeing to a 5-point consensus plan is really quite unusual in ASEAN's history. Because it is a consensus organization, it is very difficult to get unanimity. But in this instance, that unanimity came and is being acted on with discussions about an envoy going or a group of envoys going to Myanmar. There are talks in New York, as one would expect in any international crisis. The UN Security Council is going to consider and undertake consideration of what actions they should take. My understanding is that talks are ongoing on a resolution draft, and so I'm not going to get in front of any action that might be taken at the UN as those consultations continue. We will see where we get. And I think that with ASEAN centrality, you have an entire world in support of the people of Burma and wanting them to have the future that they worked so hard for. Yes, we all wish results would take place yesterday. There's no question about our impatience on behalf of the Burmese people who are not facing, they're in the midst of a humanitarian crisis. So we want results immediately, all of us do. But we also understand that sometimes diplomacy needs to take the time to make sure that all the ducks are in a row, that we can proceed forward and reach success. So we are confident that things will proceed forward, and we are confident that the international community supports the work of ASEAN and will work with each other to bring whatever is necessary to bear to get the military regime to come to the table and acknowledge that Burma needs to get back on the path to the democratic future that its people have chosen.
Next, we'll take a question from Thailand, from Tipapa Siri Pipat from The Nation Thailand Online. Tipapa, please go ahead.
In the past few years, Chinese-ASEAN bond has been more solidified, especially Chinese-Thai, in contrast to American-Taiwan. Could you tell me how the United States plan to strengthen this almost two-century relationship?
The United States and Thailand have a relationship that is 188 years old. I would see that as a pretty good bond to have between countries. Thailand is an ally of the United States. We've had a commercial relationship since 1895, also some years. We work very well together in the realms of security, economy, people to people, from our Fulbright exchanges to the Waisili program. Thailand is obviously a tremendous destination for American tourists. It has an enormously important healthcare industry that is not only important here in Thailand but around the world. So we see a very strong relationship here. You know, the United States does not ask any country to choose one country over another. What we look for is balance, a fair playing field, that everyone works under the rules-based order. The United States, as President Biden has said, is happy to compete with anyone and everyone. We're confident in our ability to do so as long as we all have a level playing field. So we understand that the PRC has a relationship with Thailand. We do not ask Thailand to choose. We just want to make sure that Thailand has a balanced relationship. And quite frankly, our ties to Thailand are deep and wide and vibrant. They include work together, a strong economic ties, security ties, and the ability to talk frankly with each other about areas in which we disagree as well. That's part of having values where democracy calls for people to be direct with each other in difficult times.
Hi, this is Qingqing from 21st Century Business Herald. With regard to the recent phone calls between China and U.S. high-level officials, do you have any comments on what this signals for China-U.S. trade relations, as well as the trade war? Are we likely to see any rollback of tariffs? Thank you.
The U.S. and China obviously talk with each other. It is an important relationship. As President Biden and Secretary Blinken have said, we have a multifaceted relationship with China. We will compete with China for the 21st century. We will challenge China where we must around issues of human rights and South China Sea, among others. And we will find areas of cooperation, whether that is perhaps in arms control, global health, and of course, climate. In terms of trade, we are assessing where the policy was left at the end of the last administration, and we'll have views ahead about how we're going to proceed. We expect there to be an ongoing relationship, but a very complex one.
Who did this? And why every time when we're looking for more detail, it's never have any name show up?
But there's many more drugs where the drugs that are seized come from, and there will always be strict controls on people coming across Australia's borders from whichever country they come from.